Welcome to Faith in 5, a weekly video devotional designed to discuss practical spiritual concepts in 5 minutes or less. I'm your host, Mark Vandellen. When I meet with couples as they prepare to get married, one of the things we talk about late in that process is a household budget. And through being in churches and studying different things of what God wants from us with our money, I've done a lot of reading on Dave Ramsey and been through the Financial Peace class. And one of the things, the very first thing that he wants to look at is a household budget. And then the next is to retire debt, right? But you can't do that unless you know where you're at. And so a household budget allows us to consider what are our priorities, right? We've got some things that are negotiables and some things that are not. Eating is not necessarily negotiable, but how much you spend on groceries is, where bills are not negotiable. And so as we think through our household budgets, a lot of times we have to plan what are the priorities, right? What is most important to us, and let's put those first. And maybe you've heard of the analogy of the putting rocks into a jar. And you start with the biggest rocks first, and then the little pebbles fill in the cracks. Then the sand, and then if you add water, you can fit so much more into this jar if you start with the priorities. And so the second commandment, we're continuing our 10 Commandments series. The second commandment is God saying in Exodus 20:4-6, he says, no false idols, have no false idols before me. Don't worship other things. God's essentially saying, in all things, put me first. I should be the priority, and everything that goes on beyond that should be a result of me as the priority. And then it goes into this long, a little bit longer piece, kind of 2 sentences that says, I will, those who don't do this, I will punish them for generations, right? 3rd and 4th generations. And at face value, that seems really weird. It doesn't seem very characteristic of the God that we know when we consider the whole story, right? From Old Testament to New Testament. But what God's saying, if you consider the first part of his commandment of put me first, don't put other things, don't let other things get in the way, because if you do, it'll affect all other things. So if we reflect back to our personal household budgets, when you don't have your priorities right, when you have more month than you do money and you're spending beyond your means, then what happens is you cripple yourself, right? That month, maybe you go a little bit bigger and you spend a little bit more than you make, and so then you have to borrow from the next month. And if you do that enough times, you start to really cripple yourself. And if you get enough debt, that can actually affect you for years. It can affect the next generation, right? Our kids start to pay for the mistakes that we've made. You can see it in our country, right? Like this debt load just continues to weigh us down because our priorities aren't aligned. And so God's saying from the beginning, put me first, but because you do that, it will grow exponentially in the positive way. And if we don't do that, it will grow exponentially in a negative way. That's the why behind this commandment. In Galatians 5:13-15, it actually says that we were called to freedom. We were created for freedom. And that freedom is not for our own gain, but so that we're better able to serve others, right? It goes on to say, to love your neighbor as yourself. When it comes to money, if you have a household budget and you put your priorities in line, then you actually spend a lot less time on a daily basis thinking about money. It's actually freeing to plan ahead of time, be able to live your month without worrying so much about it. The same goes for this. If you put God first, the rest of everything else kind of falls under that umbrella. God's the priority, and then everything you do from there serves him, and it actually grows exponentially as a result. If you can imagine all of us living in a way that we served God, and in order to do that, we served others, if everybody did that, all of our needs would be met, right? It would grow exponentially, just like saving, just like our money. And so this week, as you consider this commandment, realize that it does affect your life directly if you start with God first. Make God the priority, and everything else falls in line behind that. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to follow us each week, click here to subscribe. And if you want to take it a little bit further, click here for discussion materials.